Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 593. My opponent played e4 and I played e5, the classical response. Goes knight f3 and I go knight c6. And now he plays c3, a very rare move known as the Ponziani opening. You don't see this at the top level very much, although Hikaru Nakamura did experiment with it a few times. It's an opening that doesn't lead to an advantage for white, I think is the basic problem. Whereas other openings are thought to give white some kind of edge, or at least white is looking for an edge in other openings, whereas this one has been explored enough to, it seems that black can equalize with good play. So you don't see it so much at the top level, but that shouldn't really discourage you from playing it if you find it interesting. I mean, it leads into unusual lines, and if you play it often, you will be more experienced with it than your opponent, and so you may have an advantage just from being more familiar with the territory. But objectively, you don't have an advantage. Anyway, the problem with openings like this, where these pawns are on d2 and c3, is that the e4 pawn is lacking its natural defender. The knight wants to come to d2 or c3 to defend that pawn when it comes under attack. And so whenever you see this configuration, you should be looking for counterattacking moves. And you see the top two choices here are knight f6 and d5. D5 is what I played. I think it's a little more challenging, and in fact I get an edge out of this opening as black. The knight f6 line is also interesting, so let's take a look at it briefly. Knight f6, and now d4, not bothering to defend the e-pawn, but counterattacking black's e-pawn. After this exchange, this is basically a pawn sack. This pushes on, and the knight going back to b8 is the main move, and bishop to d3, hitting this knight. So the knight can go back to f6 or out to c5, hitting the bishop. Anyway, sharp play where white has sacrificed a pawn, but it seems like black can equalize. I don't know that line so well, because as black, I always play the other line with d5. I think this is pretty interesting as well. The only way for white to play for anything in this position is to go with this queen a4 move. My opponent played e takes d5, and then actually black has the advantage after that. Queen a4 is the idea here, pinning that knight. And now this pawn needs to be defended. It's actually hanging because it's under attack from that knight. And the funny reply here is f6. And now bishop b5 with more pressure on the knight, and not defending with the bishop, but defending with the knight is the main move here. And then after this exchange, this is d4 can be played here, or white can castle, and it is a position which is about even. It looks like white has some pressure, and black's development may be a bit awkward. But now black is in a position to break the pin and kick the bishop away. So I think this will turn out to be okay. For this move is already playable because the queen is also looking at the bishop. So anyway, this is okay for black, but that's a position which is about even. So both sides can play that way. Okay, so let's go back to the game. In the game, I played d5, and he just took the pawn. And this gives black quite an edge out of the opening, although I missed the key idea here. The real idea is e4. Push that pawn forward and clamp down on the d3 square. And white has a big advantage in space, and black has a big advantage in space, and white's development continues to be awkward. So that's the best way for black to proceed. Anyway, at this point, I just start developing my pieces. I was out of my opening theory, and I was just trying to get my pieces out. White castles. I go bishop to d6, and he plays g3. And once again, right here, I've got most of my pieces developed. I could be thinking about pushing on with e4. Would be a very good move in this position as well. I castled, and he goes d3. So now he's shut down that move for the moment, or well, you know, it would provoke some trades, and I wasn't sure I wanted to trade queens at this point. Instead, I noticed that he's got these weak light squares. I can bring my bishop out to h3. I play h6 as a preparatory move before playing that. Keeps his bishop and his knight from hopping into the g4 square. Although bishop h3, since it comes with a tempo, I could have played that first. He goes knight bd2. Now I go bishop h3. His rook gets out of the way, and I bring another rook into the game, continue developing, and he goes with bishop f1. So he's trading off my light-squared bishop, which is okay because he's still got these light-squared weaknesses. Oh, let's see, he took back with the knight. He still has these light-squared weaknesses, and now he no longer has a bishop to defend them. So I think this is good for black still. He goes, but right here I start to go downhill. It's my turn after knight takes f1. And my next move is a big mistake. So to keep the advantage, the chess engine suggests a couple of moves. One is putting the bishop on a better square. Bishop to c5 looks at that interesting diagonal, and it also opens up retreat possibilities for my queen. I was feeling that my queen was a bit exposed there on d5, and I tried maneuvering. Another move here would be just rook f to e1, just developing. That would be fine as well. I played queen b5, and this is just a bad move because after a4, and I verified this with the engine, there's no good square for the queen other than to come back to d5. So I just granted my opponent two free moves. One of them he used for a4, which helps with later queenside expansion, and the other move he plays knight e3, getting his knight to a good post. So I've basically given up that opening advantage I had. Let's see, he goes queen c2 here. Oh, queen d7, getting away from his rook. And his rook comes over here to harass my queen some more. Let's see, I don't want to keep moving the queen, so I place the rook over here. He went knight d2. Then I went queen e7. So this is one queen move too many. I really needed to play something like a4 here to stop the queenside expansion. So after this move, he plays b5, and from this point forward, actually white has the advantage. So I moved my queen so much as to give away my advantage, and then I moved it some more and gave the advantage to to white. So it's a cautionary note. You know, if you find yourself moving the same piece over and over again, there's a good chance you're doing something wrong. Not always, but sometimes, often. Let's see. I tried pushing on with e4 here. But and now there's no knight here, so this move doesn't really come with much of an impact, and he can just bypass it by playing d4. I try a5 to try and undermine these pawns, but he just pushes on, driving my knight back to b8. And it's a long time before this knight gets into the game. In fact, we're on move 20. It won't be until move 30 that I finally get this knight over to f6 and doing something useful. So 10 whole moves, this knight is out of the game, whereas my opponent's pieces are slowly becoming more active. Oh, cancel that. He went with this knight to c4, played b6. He took off my bishop here. Okay, so here's your tactical quiz for this video. There's 3 ways to take back. And of those 3, 2 of them are okay and 1 of them is a mistake. And so which one is the mistake and why is it a mistake? That's your tactical quiz here. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. Pause the video if you want time to think about it. It's pretty easy, so you should be able to find it. The move I played is the mistake. I played the move rook takes d6. And the reason it's a mistake is because he has bishop to a3, just simply skewering those pieces. So luckily for me, he didn't take advantage of that. Played knight d4, I moved my rook back, and then he just dropped his rook back to e3. So he kind of wasted a couple of moves there, as well as missing that opportunity. But it still leaves white with the advantage. He has this mobile queenside pawn majority. I'm not effectively restraining it. He can push these pawns forward, and I think this is probably almost winning for white with good play. Let's see, I bring my knight over to d5, which maybe is not such a great idea since he can kick that with tempo. He plays queen b3, putting pressure on the knight, but I wanted to just trade off this knight on e3. I thought that was a good piece. He takes back. I go queen to f6. So now I start this slow process of reorganizing my pieces so that the knight can come out. So I'm moving the queen out of the way so I can move the rook out of the way so I can move the knight off the back rank. And then I'm going to have to move the queen again so the knight could go to f6. A very slow plan. And my opponent comes up with an interesting plan here. He starts with rook a2. He doesn't stick to it consistently. He plays a couple of other moves in between, but first he doubles on the d file, so that part is good. I got knight d7. Now he plays c4. Yeah, this is also good. It's part of mobilizing the queen side pawn majority. I go queen g6, making room for my knight. He goes queen c3. I think maybe that's not doing a whole lot. I go knight f6. He goes king g2. Again, I think that's kind of a wasted move. I go knight g4. He pushes it back. So yeah, knight g4 is probably premature. I don't have any square to go to but back. And now he pushes on with d5. So combined with doubling the rooks and pushing this d pawn, that was a good plan. There was a couple of wasted moves in there with the king and the queen, but now he comes back to the main plan. And in fact, I think white gets a winning advantage pretty shortly here with this pawn push to d6. And we can see the use of his pawn majority to disrupt my minority of pawns here on the queen side. I have to take because my rook is under attack, and if I don't take, he's going to take on c7. That will be a dangerous threat. But when he takes back, he activates his rook. So he's disrupted my pawns over here, and he's doing it with tempo on my queen. He's invading with his pieces. So probably winning for white at this point. He's built up that advantage to a pretty significant edge. So queen to f5, defending my knight. It was under attack by two pieces, so I had to defend it. He brings his rook down to chase the queen away, and luckily for me, I had a tempo move here. So this is why his king to g2 move earlier actually hurt him a little bit. If he hadn't played that, I wouldn't have had this escape. He could have just gone directly for that d-pawn push. Okay, he played his king back to g1, and now I have time to escape with my knight to e5. And right here, he gives up the advantage. The best way for him to continue is just to grab this pawn. The b pawn is loose, and this queenside majority should win the game for white. Instead, he went for this rook trade. I'm not sure why. I continued with knight to d3. He takes, I take, and then he played queen d2. This is defending on f2, which actually was currently defended, but maybe he wants to be able to move the bishop. And maybe there's ideas of sacking the exchange on d3, as we see later. I lift my rook. I'm going to just bring it over here to the king side and try and get pressure. And by now, the tables have turned. After this check, and my king going here, and rook to d7, actually black has a slight edge. Maybe white would have been better off switching back to just pressuring this b pawn. But anyway, he played rook d7. So I go rook g6, and now I've got some pressure against his king side. He plays king h2 to get out of this pin. Otherwise, this f4 to f5 might have been a big threat. But actually, it's still kind of a threat. Let's see. I start out with h5. He brings his rook up, and I play f5 here, shielding my h-pawn from his rook, and also preventing him from, the h-pawn would go with check, so I had to be careful about that. So I blocked that with the f-pawn, and now this f5 push is an idea here, but also h5. Anyway, I checked this later. It turns out that there's not many good defenses, and so this exchange sack was not unheard of, not necessarily a bad idea. If he just pushes on the queen side, for example, I can push on with h5 and break through that way. That looks to be winning. So he takes off the knight, and he at least gets a pawn for the exchange. But I can push on with h4 now, and I'm still breaking through around his king. He tries queen f4 to come in and defend, but I take here with check. And he doesn't have a good answer here. If he takes back, then his queen is hanging, so he has to move the king. And the only legal square for the king is to g1, and now I can take the pawn on f2. It'll be a double check. The king will have to move again, and then I can at least grab the bishop if I can't find anything better there. So I'm going to be breaking through and winning. He resigned in this position. So I thought that was an interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.